This week we have started talking about decimals. The first lesson we learned was about comparing decimals. So this will be a quick review over how do we compare decimals to place them in order from least to greatest or from greatest to least. And I put a funny joke on here. What did one decimal say to the other? You've got a point. Let's start by taking a look at decimal place value. The place values are going to play an important role in understanding how to decide if one number with a decimal is greater than another number with a decimal. So here's my decimal point. The tenths place it's similar to saying that you have a tenth of a fraction. The hundredths place is similar to saying I have a hundredths, and etc. And it continues. So a thousandths would be saying I have something over 1,000. So if you think about this, for example, let's say I put 1/10 and make all of these out of 1. 1/10 is going to be closer to a whole than 1/100th or 1/1000th. So keep that in mind that the tenths place is the closest to the whole amount. So we always need to start by looking at the wholes and then looking at the tenths. Now let's take a look at comparing the following decimals, determining which is greater than, less than, or if they are equal to one another. So on this first one, I'm going to line them up so you can kind of see what I'm looking at. Always line your decimals up. That may help you be able to see which one is greater. So if I look at these two on number 1, I have 3 3/10, and then I have 33 hundredths. Well, there is not a whole number before the decimal on the second one, and there is a whole number on the first one. So I know if I have 3 wholes, that's greater than any decimal or just fraction. Okay? Now let's take a look at this next one. We have 4 96 hundredths, and then we have 496 thousandths. Once again, if you look, the whole is 4. There is no whole in this next one, so the whole amount is always going to be the greater one. Now let's look at look at this next one, we have 7 31 hundredths. You have 7 31 hundredths. So these are equal. They're exactly the same number. Now if I take a look at, I have 6 72 hundredths and 6 69 hundredths. So you always start closest to the decimal. I can tell that my wholes are the same, so those don't help. Now I'm looking at the tenths place. I see that the 7 is greater than a 6. So I know that 6 72 hundredths is greater than 6 69 hundredths. Now let's look at number 5. We have 9 6 hundredths and 9 100ths. So the whole numbers, once again, are the same. They don't help. If you look now, the tenths places are the same, so those didn't help. Now I have to look at the hundredths place. The 6 is greater than the 1, so I know that 9 6 hundredths is greater. And lastly, we have 4 28 hundredths and 4 32 hundredths. I'm going to write it underneath. I can look, the whole numbers are the same again, so those don't help. Then I look at my tenths place. The 3 is greater than a 2, so I know that 4 32 hundredths is greater. Now let's take a look at ordering decimals from least to greatest by looking at the numbers below. The first thing I recommend you doing is rewriting all the numbers with the decimal lined up so you can see the exact place value of the tenths, hundredths, and thousandths place. For example, like this. Now we are going to have to look at each place value to determine the smallest number to the greatest number. So I'm starting with the tenths place. If I go through the tenths place on each of these, I see this one has a 7, this has a 0, an 8, a 0, a 9, and a 0. So 0 would be the lowest number in the tenths place, but there are 3 of those. So I'm going to come over here and rewrite these real quick, and then we're going to compare them to see which one is actually the smallest. So I'm looking now at the hundredths place because they all have 0, so now I have to look at the hundredths. Well, 2 is the smallest number, so the 24 thousandths would actually be the smallest number, so I'm going to write that first. Then I will have to look for the 6s. I'm actually going to have to look at the thousandths place since they both have 6 in the hundredths. Remember, in decimals, you can add zeros to the end because it doesn't change the value. Now I can see that the 600 is less than the 62 thousandths. So I'm going to write that for the next number. And then I can write the 62 thousandths. Now I go back and I look again at my tens place for a second time. I had 7, 8, 8, 9. Okay, so I have these already taken care of. So I know 7 would be my next number. And there's no other 7, so I don't need to compare. But now I have two 8s that we need to compare. I have 834 thousandths and 831 thousandths. Well, if I think about that, well, I know 831 is less than 834. So that one would come next, and I'm going to jump down here. So that would leave this 834 thousandths to be next, and then I would have my 92 hundredths. And that is writing them from least to greatest. Let's end by summarizing everything we discussed in this video. So we discussed that place value plays an important role, that we must look at each place value to determine which number is the greatest. Next, we discussed when we were comparing different types of numbers with decimals, it's important that we line up the decimal place so we can see the tenths, the hundredths, and the thousandths place value to determine the correct order. Well, this covers the basics of comparing decimals. If you still need help, come see me in tutorials. Remember, we will have a concept check on this week.